It's late. Your thoughts are awake. Settle in close, inner somniacs. You're sitting at the table, the one you sat at as a child. Same chairs, maybe. Same voices filling the room with laughter and stories that don't quite include you. The mashed potatoes are being passed. Someone's asking about your job, your life, your plans. But they're asking the version of you they remember, not the one you've become. You smile, you answer, you pass the gravy. And beneath it all, there's this feeling, this specific, suffocating awareness that you are more alone right now, surrounded by your family, than you ever are in your room at 3 a.m. scrolling through your phone in the dark. How is that possible? How can solitude feel like companionship, and company feel like isolation? If you've ever felt this way, if you've ever counted the minutes until you could escape back to your room, back to the quiet, back to the place where you don't have to perform or explain or become someone you stopped being years ago, I need you to know something. You're not broken, you're not ungrateful, you're not failing at family. You're experiencing something profound about identity, connection, and what it means to be truly seen. Tonight, we're going to understand it together. There's something about sitting at the Christmas table that can make you feel more alone than you've felt all year. It's not the loneliness of being ignored. It's the loneliness of being misunderstood. It's the strange ache of being remembered incorrectly, of being seen but not recognized, of being present in body while feeling utterly absent in essence. You know this feeling. You feel it in the slight dissociation in your posture, the way you participate but faintly, the way you sit at the table but aren't really there, as if you're watching the scene unfold from behind glass. The conversation swirls around you, Aunt Linda's garden, Uncle Mike's familiar story, Cousin Earl's latest side hustle, while the questions you're asked skim the surface. Safe questions, predictable, nothing that touches who you've actually become. And so, without meaning to, you slip into the role your family expects. The quiet one, the responsible one, the good one, the peacemaker, the lost one, the funny one, the invisible one. Whatever your role was, the table remembers it, and you perform it again, not because you want to, but because that room has gravity, and it's easier than trying to explain who you actually are now. This is the root of the loneliness at the dinner table, not the absence of connection, but the echo of a connection to a self that no longer exists. If you've ever felt this, you know it comes with a particular kind of shame, because the world tells you that proximity equals connection, that blood equals understanding, that the people who raised you should be the ones who see you most clearly. And when that doesn't happen, when you feel more yourself in the silent company of your own four walls than in a room full of your own history, you begin to wonder if something in you is fundamentally broken. But here's what I've noticed, watching people navigate these annual performances. The loneliness isn't evidence of your failure, it's evidence of something else entirely. There's a concept in psychology called the looking-glass self. Charles Cooley suggested that we shape our identity through the reflections we receive from others. Who we think we are, our worth, our personality, our potential, is built partly on how we believe others see us. But in most spaces, you get to change. You get to grow. You get to update your reflection. With friends, with co-workers, with partners, with strangers. You get to be the person you've spent years becoming. You exist with a certain coherence. But at the family table, the looking glass becomes fixed. Your reflection is frozen in time. Your family sees you as the child they once knew, the version of you that existed before you had language for yourself, before heartbreak, before self-discovery, before you built a life that fits you better than the one you were born into. And as you look around that table, you feel yourself being pulled back into your old reflection. You feel your hard-won self slipping away, replaced by old reflexes. Your voice shifts subtly. Your posture adjusts. You laugh in an old rhythm. Not consciously. Your body simply remembers a script you no longer believe in. And before you know it, you become, against your will, the version of yourself they still think you are. This is what psychologists call identity foreclosure, when your sense of self gets frozen in someone else's perception of who you should be. These patterns of old reflexes are grooved so deep in your nervous system that proximity alone reactivates them. Your family isn't doing this maliciously. They're simply operating from the last reflection of you they really knew. This is why the loneliness hits so sharply at the family table. It's not just that they don't see who you are. It's that the dinner table tries to pull you back into who you were. Now, here's the part nobody tells you about family. Family systems are remarkably resistant to change. They have a way of preserving equilibrium. Everyone has a part to play. Maybe you were the peacemaker, the one who diffused conflict before it started. Even now, decades later, someone makes a passive-aggressive comment, and you feel the reflex to smooth things over before your mind even catches up. Maybe you were the scapegoat, the emotional lightning rod, the one who bore the family's dysfunction, who was blamed, who couldn't do anything right. And even though you've built a life where you're competent and valued and respected, sitting at this table, you feel yourself shrinking, doubting, apologizing for taking up space. Maybe you were the invisible one, not the problem child or the golden child, just there, the background character in the family narrative. There you sit at the table and realize no one has asked you a real question in an hour. They're not ignoring you purposely. They're just continuing a pattern so old it's become invisible itself. These roles don't disappear just because you grew, but they no longer fit. They limit your movement. They make it hard to breathe. They make it hard to be. Sure, you know who you are outside this room. You've changed. You've grown. You've spent years in limbo, in solitude, in careful self-examination. And you've built a life that feels true to something deep in you. But in this dining room, this person you've become doesn't have a seat at the table. And so, you sit there, feeling the gap between who you are and who your family needs you to be. This is where the loneliness lives, in that gap. That's the thing about family. We're taught that togetherness equals connection, that sitting in the same room should somehow breed closeness, that the dinner table is where families belong. But proximity without recognition is its own kind of exile. You can be embraced and still feel unseen. You can be surrounded by voices and feel completely unheard. You can sit at the center of a celebration and feel like you're watching it from a distance. Because connection isn't about bodies in the same space. Connection is about mutual recognition, being seen for who you actually are, and having that self reflected back with acceptance. And when that recognition is missing, when the people around the table are relating to a memory of you rather than the person you've become, the physical proximity becomes cruel. It throws into stark relief the space between what should be and what is, between the closeness you're expected to feel and the disconnection you actually sit with. Some people feel perfectly comfortable at the table because their identity hasn't shifted dramatically. They still fit the reflection being offered. The mirror still matches. But for those of you who've changed, for those who've grown, expanded, unraveled, rebuilt, the dissonance is unmistakable. You're sitting at the table like a foreigner in your own family, fluent in a language no one else seems to speak. Now contrast this with your room, your sanctuary, your late-night refuge. In your room, you don't have to translate yourself. Your room doesn't require explanations. You can speak with abandon. You can be quiet without it worrying anyone. You can feel without performing. You can exist without shrinking or expanding or adjusting your matter. You can sit in the exact shape of your own complexity without apology. This isn't about misanthropy or social dysfunction. It's about the exhaustion of code-switching your entire identity. In your room, you speak your native language. At the table, you're translating in real time, and something always gets lost in translation. This is why solitude can feel safer than togetherness. In solitude, you're not managing anyone else's emotional reality. You're not performing a version of yourself. You aren't. You're just there, in whatever shape you actually are. Many people misinterpret this feeling. They think, I'm the problem. I should be grateful. Why does everyone else seem fine? Why can't I feel at home here? But here's the truth. Proximity is not connection. Recognition is connection. You can sit inches from someone and feel invisible. You can be in a room full of people and feel utterly unknown. You can show up year after year and never feel like your current self has been invited. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling the mismatch. You're not failing the table. The table simply hasn't updated its invitation. Here's the perspective shift. The loneliness you feel at the table is not evidence that you're broken. It's evidence that you've grown. Erik Erikson described identity development as the process of choosing your values, beliefs, and selfhood consciously, not simply inheriting them. And not everyone completes this work, but you have. You left, literally or figuratively. You built a life that required you to confront who you actually are versus who you were told to be. And now, sitting at this dinner table, you're feeling the friction between those two selves. That friction, it's not pathological, that's developmental. Uncomfortable, yes, but meaningful. It means you've outpaced the reflection. You've become someone your family hasn't met yet, and that's not your failure, that's your evolution. Once you understand this, something softens. You stop expecting the table to recognize the version of you they've never encountered. You stop waiting for the middle of dinner to become a coming-of-age ceremony. You stop seeing their outdated reflection as an indictment of your progress. Some people learn to make peace with this reality. What I've observed in such people is they stop expecting the table to give them what their room gives them. They stop measuring the health of these relationships by standards those relationships can't meet. They show up when they choose to show up, with a kind of gentle detachment. They can be present without needing to be seen. They can participate without disappearing. The ones who survive the table with their sense of self intact are the ones who accept that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is accept the limits of what these relationships can hold. They let family be what it is. Imperfect, familiar, human. Not a place to be fully seen, but a place to be lightly connected. Sure, it's not immaculate understanding, but it is something. It's continuity, shared history. It's the strange yet warm comfort of familiar dysfunction and the faith that these people, your people, however imperfectly, were there and will continue to be here. So no, you don't have to contort your image to fit old reflections, but you also don't have to reject the table entirely. You can hold both truths. They don't fully know me, but I still choose to be here. You become gracious. So if you're listening to this tonight, sitting in a house filled with voices and memories and mismatched reflections and expectations, remember this. You're not more alone at that table because something is wrong with you. You're more alone because that table asks you to be someone you no longer are. And your room, your sanctuary, your midnight quiet, that's where your real self lives. That's where your reflection is truest in its becoming. That's where your identity is allowed to breathe. The loneliness at the Christmas table is real, yes, but so is the peace of being yourself when the door finally closes behind you. Both can be true, and holding both without collapsing into shame, that's not isolation, that's wisdom. You're allowed to outgrow your old reflection. You're allowed to feel more yourself in the quiet. You're allowed to return to your room tonight and exhale into your own shape without apology. Because solitude isn't your escape, it's your homecoming. And with that, drift off or dive deeper. I'll still be here in the quiet hours, Insomniacs.